Hey guys, my name is Meylan, and I'm going to talk about this article I read called What Every Language Learner Should Know About Cross-Cultural Communication. It's by Krystyna Trushyna, and I actually found it really interesting because I've always liked learning languages, but I never really thought about the cultural side of communication this deeply before. And I picked this article because, well, I've been someone who's in consistently learning more than 10 languages. Like I would pick one up, learn a few phrases, then move to another one just out of curiosity. But after reading this, I realized there's this whole other layer that I never really paid attention to, and how culture actually changes the meaning of what we say and how people respond to us. So at first, I thought being able to speak the language, even just a little bit, would make people respect your effort, like this foreigner is trying to speak our language. But Christina's article kind of opened my eyes that it's not always that simple. So the article is basically about how language learning isn't just about words or grammar. So Christina shares her own experience as someone who studied more than 8 languages, and she gives lots of personal stories about cultural misunderstandings she's had while speaking perfectly and fine grammatically, but still getting the vibe completely wrong. For example, she told the story about ordering a food in Italy and she used the right words and said please and everything, but the baker still looked confused and replied super slowly as if she didn't really understand. That's when she realized the problem wasn't her Italian, it was the way she said things. It was her tone, her rhythm, her body languages, and that's kind of the whole point of this article. She says language is only half the equation and culture is the other half. She calls it the invisible layer, which is the little things like eye contact, how people smile, when to be direct or indirect, or what topics are polite to bring up. Those are what really make or break a conversation. And she also shares an eye-opening examples like how in France she used to use an informal word with someone who wasn't ready for that level of familiarity, and it completely changed the mood of their conversation. It's small details like that that can make someone saying you are rude, even when you didn't mean to be. And one thing I really liked about this article is how it explains the idea of high context and low context cultures. So, in high context cultures like Japan or Korea, people rely more on what's not said, like tone, silence, or shared understanding. Meanwhile, in low context cultures like Germany or the US, people tend to say something more directly and expect you to mean exactly what you say. And that part hit me because it really explains a lot of the confusion that happens between people from different places. Like, imagine a super direct person talking to someone who communicates in a more subtle way. They might both think that the other is being rude or cold when really they're just speaking in their own cultural style. And Christina also said that people are more forgiving of grammar mistakes than cultural mistakes. And that line really stuck with me because it's so true. You can make small errors and people will still appreciate your effort. But if you act too familiar, like if you interrupt too often or use the wrong tone, it can come off as disrespectful, even if your words are fine. And reading these made me reflect on my own experience. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been learning a bunch of languages here and there, but I never thought deeply about the behavioral part of communication. I just assumed that trying to speak someone's language was enough to show respect. And maybe that's because of the culture I grew up in. So in my country, people are generally very warm and welcoming toward foreigners. Even if their grammar is broken or they mispronounce words, people still smile, people still help them out, people think it's cute or respectful that they're trying. So I kind of thought the same thing applied everywhere. But when I started interacting with international classmates, I noticed it's not always like that because some of them behave in very low context way, like being super straightforward, very focused, or kind of distant at first. but not in a bad way. Some are awkward and quiet and seem like they don't really know how to interact. And then there are others who are super friendly and easygoing and really open to connecting. That's when I realized what Krishna meant about how communication is more than language, because you cannot assume everyone's way of showing friendliness or respect is the same. Because some cultures show warmth immediately, while others take more time, and some people express respect by being quiet, and others by being enthusiastic. And it's fun and a bit challenging to deal with all those differences, but also kind of fascinating. Like you start to see communication as this bigger picture, not just about talking, but about observing, adapting, and understanding what makes people comfortable. And I think the insights from this article are super helpful for international classroom or global workplaces. For example, if you're in a group project with classmates from different countries, it's important to notice how they prefer to communicate. Some might expect you to be very direct with your opinion, while others might prefer a softer, a more indirect approach. Or if you're working with people from another country, you have to pay attention not just to what they say, but how they say it, like their tone, the rhythm of their speech. Because sometimes what feels like a cold or rude response isn't actually that. It's just how their culture communicates. And Christina also mentioned the idea of reading the room, which I think is really useful, and she says real fluency isn't only about knowing the words, but knowing when to speak, knowing when to listen, knowing how your words will land. And that's something I really want to practice more, not just studying a language, but studying the people who speak it. So, what did I learn about improving cross-cultural communication from this article? Honestly, I learned that communication is empathy in action, because it's about being aware, it's about not assuming that everyone sees things the same way you do, because it's also about learning to adjust, to listen more carefully, and to approach conversation with curiosity instead of judgment. And this article made me realize that being a good communicator across cultures doesn't mean being perfect, because it merely means being open-minded and willing to learn even if you make mistakes. And I think that's something all of us can apply in our daily lives, especially in global classroom setting like ours. So yeah, overall I really like this article, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's learning a new language or interacting with people from different backgrounds. It's insightful but super easy to read, and it really makes you think about the small things that affect communication. And this article taught me that cross cultural communication is about understanding people beyond words and learning to connect with curiosity and respect. Thank you guys. See you.